My daughter-in-law just made the biggest mistake of her life. This morning, I got a text that made me smile. Borrowed your old ring for tonight's gala, Grandma. Thanks, I texted back. Have fun, sweetheart. Then I called my lawyer and said 5 words that would change everything. She took item number 847. If you're watching this, hit subscribe because what happened next is absolutely wild. And drop a comment telling me where you're from. This story is going to blow your mind. My name is Margaret. I'm 71 years old, and for the last 10 years, I've been the invisible woman in my own home. My daughter-in-law Rebecca joined our family a decade ago when she married my son David. From day one, she treated me like I was in her way. Rebecca is the type of woman who thinks the world owes her everything, always dressed in designer clothes, dripping in expensive jewelry my son bought to keep her happy. She walked into my house like she owned it, and slowly she made me feel like a guest in the home I built with my late husband. Margaret, make me coffee. Margaret, iron my dress for tonight. Margaret, you're walking too loud. My head hurts. Never please, never thank you. Just orders like I was the help. At family dinners, she'd talk about me like I wasn't even there. David, your mother should really think about moving to a senior home. This house is too much for someone her age. My son, my own son, would just look down and mumble, Mum's fine here, Rebecca. But I could see it. Rebecca was poisoning him against me, little by little. She had big plans for my house, turn my living room into her office, rip out the garden my husband and I spent 40 years growing, and replace it with a modern entertainment space. For years, I took it, the insults, the disrespect, being invisible in my own home. When she had guests over, I had to hide in my room because old people make everyone uncomfortable. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering how I became nothing in the house I built with love. Here's what Rebecca never knew, what nobody in my family knew. My late husband Thomas didn't just leave me this house. During our last years together, he'd been quietly collecting valuable art, jewelry, and antiques. He knew I was discreet. He knew I'd never show off. And he trusted me to handle his legacy when the time came. In a safe hidden behind a painting in my bedroom, he kept a collection worth over $15 million. Among those pieces was the ring Rebecca just borrowed, a 5-carat pink diamond ring made by a French jeweller in 1920, worth $3 million. To someone who doesn't know jewelry, it looks like a nice vintage ring, nothing special. To experts, it's a masterpiece. Rebecca had this charity gala tonight, one of those fancy events where rich wives compete to see who has the best jewelry. For weeks, I'd heard her complaining. She didn't have the right accessory for her gold dress. She'd been flipping through jewelry catalogues, sighing because everything she liked cost too much, even with David's generous budget. This morning, I was watering my plants when I saw her walk into my room, without permission. It wasn't the first time she'd gone through my things. But this time, I watched her open my jewelry box, the small wooden one where I keep less valuable pieces, and her eyes landed on the pink diamond ring. She picked it up, held it to the light, and I saw that look on her face, that smug smile she always wore when she thought she'd found something she could use. An hour later, the text came. Borrowed your old ring for tonight's gala, Grandma. Thanks. She didn't ask permission, just took it, like everything of mine was hers to take, like I was too old and worthless to own anything valuable. When I read that message, something inside me snapped. 10 years of humiliation, 10 years of being treated like garbage in my own home. But taking that ring, that specific ring, was the last straw. I sat in my garden chair, looking at my phone, and for the first time in years, I really smiled. Have fun, sweetheart, I replied. Then I dialed James, my lawyer, Thomas's best friend, the only person who knew the truth about our fortune. James, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. It's time. Rebecca just took item 847. Silence on the other end. Then James laughed. Margaret, are you absolutely sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. I'm sure. After 10 years, it's time she learned who she's been dealing with. Here's what most people don't know about valuable collections. For years, James had been documenting every piece Thomas collected, officially registering them as high-value items with specific inventory numbers. Each piece had certificates, appraisals, and full insurance coverage. The ring Rebecca took was legally registered as item 847, valued at $3 million. I'm calling the insurance company now, James told me. When a registered piece is taken without authorization, we file a theft report immediately. The police will need to recover the stolen property. While James made calls, I sat in my living room remembering everything. The time Rebecca hosted a dinner for David's business partners and told me to eat in the kitchen because there wasn't enough room at the table. Last Christmas, when she opened her expensive gifts and handed me a cheap scarf, saying, "We got you something simple because you don't need much at your age." The day her book club came over, I was reading in my favourite chair when she told me, in front of everyone, "Margaret, could you go to your room? We need privacy for adult conversation." Her friends looked at me with pity, like I was an old dog that needed to be moved out of the way. But what hurt most was the conversation I'd overheard last week. Rebecca was on the phone with her sister. I could hear everything from the hallway. "I swear this old woman drives me crazy. She lives in this huge house like a queen, but look at how she dresses. Look at her cheap jewellery. It's pathetic. David and I are just waiting for her to move to a nursing home. When she finally leaves, I'm throwing all her ugly antiques in the trash." That conversation was when I decided, enough. Rebecca didn't just hate me. She hated everything Thomas and I built together. She had no idea those ugly antiques were worth more money than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. James called back within the hour. "Everything's ready, Margaret. The theft report is filed. The ring is listed as stolen property worth $3 million. I gave the police the hotel address where the gala is happening." "What happens to Rebecca?" James sighed. "Margaret, technically she's committed grand larceny. We're talking $3 million. She could face serious prison time, but you're the victim, so you decide if you want to press charges or just recover your property." "Let me think about it," I said. "For now, I just want to see her face when she realizes she completely underestimated the useless old lady she's been treating like trash." 30 minutes later, my phone rang. "David." He sounded panicked. "Mum." "What's going on? Police just showed up at Rebecca's gala. They're saying she stole a $3 million ring. This has to be a mistake." "It's not a mistake, son," I said calmly. "Your wife took a very valuable piece from your father's collection without permission. That ring is worth exactly $3 million. She had no right to take it." "What collection?" "What are you talking about? Dad never had anything worth $3 million. Mum, you need to call the police and tell them this is a misunderstanding. I couldn't believe it. My own son didn't even know. Thomas had been so careful to keep everything secret, even from David. He wanted to protect us from the dangers that come with visible wealth, kidnappers, con artists, greedy relatives." "David," I said, "there's a lot you don't know about your father. Or about me. Your wife just made a very serious mistake, and she's going to face the consequences." "Mum, have you lost your mind? Rebecca is crying. They're treating her like a criminal. Her friends are recording everything. Her reputation is destroyed." "Her reputation," I repeated. "What about the 10 years I've spent being treated like garbage in my own house? What about all the times she humiliated me in front of people? What about that conversation where she told her sister I was pathetic?" David went quiet. He knew exactly what conversation I meant, because he'd heard it too, and done nothing. "Mom, please," he finally said. "Rebecca can be difficult, but she doesn't deserve jail for a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding, David. It's theft. Your wife is about to learn that the woman she looked down on isn't the helpless old lady she thought." I hung up. My son had spent 10 years watching his wife humiliate me, never once raising his voice to defend me. Now that consequences arrived, he wanted me to be the one to save her. But I wasn't going to do it. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't going to be the invisible woman who took everything in silence. Richard continued. Mrs. Margaret, your daughter-in-law doesn't just see you as useless. She sees you as a source of income she can exploit without consequences. In her own words, during a phone call with that appraiser, she said, "The old lady doesn't even know what she has." I could steal half her stuff and she'd never notice. She's too senile to keep track of her belongings. Those words hit me like a slap. Rebecca hadn't just been stealing. She'd been laughing at me, thinking I was too stupid to realize, planning to rob me blind. "James," I said, standing up with determination I hadn't felt in years. "I want you to press every possible charge, not just for today's ring, but for all the thefts over the past 2 years. And I want David to know exactly what kind of woman he married." "Are you absolutely sure, Margaret? Once we make this public, the whole family will know the truth about Thomas's fortune, about Rebecca's crimes. There's no going back." I looked out the window at the garden Thomas and I had grown for 40 years. The garden Rebecca wanted to destroy for her entertainment space. I thought about all the humiliations, all the times I felt invisible, all the nights I cried, wondering if I really was as worthless as Rebecca made me feel. "James," I said, "it's time this senile old woman teaches them a lesson they'll never forget." When we arrived at the Plaza Hotel, it was chaos. 5 police cars at the entrance, news reporters who'd caught wind of the drama, groups of gala guests leaving, whispering and pointing. This was the kind of scandal our city's high society would remember for years. I walked into the lobby and immediately saw Rebecca. She was sitting on a leather sofa, surrounded by 3 police officers. For the first time in 10 years, she didn't look like the elegant, controlled woman she'd always been. Her makeup was streaked with tears, her gold dress was wrinkled, and her hands were cuffed in front of her. The ring, my $3 million ring, was no longer on her finger. David stood beside her, gesturing wildly as he argued with a detective. When he saw me walk in with James and Richard, his face changed from desperation to fury. He walked straight toward me, and I could see it in his eyes. He blamed me, not his thieving wife, for this situation. "Mom, you need to fix this right now," he yelled at me in front of the crowded lobby. "Rebecca is being publicly humiliated because of you. Her friends are posting videos online. Her reputation is completely ruined." Her reputation? I kept my voice calm, even though I was shaking with rage inside. "David, your wife stole a $3 million ring from me. We're not talking about a misunderstanding over a trinket. We're talking about a serious crime." "But Mum, you never told us you had anything so valuable." If we'd known, this never would have happened. Rebecca thought it was just some old worthless ring. James stepped forward and handed David a thick folder. "Mr. David, here are all the documents proving the ring's value, certificates of authenticity, insurance policies. Your wife didn't steal a worthless old ring. She stole a historical piece of jewelry valued at $3 million. David opened the folder. I watched his expression change from disbelief to complete shock. This can't be real. Dad really had these things? Why didn't you ever tell us?" "Because your father knew it was better to keep our wealth private," I explained, "and seeing how your wife has been stealing from me for 2 years. He was right. Stealing from you for 2 years. "What are you talking about?" Richard stepped forward with the complete file, the photos of Rebecca at pawn shops, the recordings where she lied about where the jewelry came from, the receipts, everything. "Your wife, Mr. David, has been systematically selling your mother's belongings for the past 2 years. We've documented thefts totaling $45,000. David went pale as he reviewed the evidence. I could see his world crumbling. The woman he married, The woman he'd let treat me like garbage for a decade was a thief who'd been exploiting his own mother. Detective Lopez approached us. "Mrs. Margaret, I need you to officially confirm some details. Did you give your daughter-in-law permission to take this ring?" "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "I have the text message where she admits she borrowed it without asking permission. In my world, taking something without permission is called theft." "And can you confirm the ring legally belongs to you?" James intervened. "Detective, here are all the legal documents. The ring was purchased by Mrs. Margaret's late husband in 1975. It's registered in his will. It's insured for full value. It's part of the official estate inventory Mrs. Margaret inherited." The detective reviewed everything and nodded. "Everything checks out. Mrs. Margaret, do you wish to press criminal charges against your daughter-in-law?" Before I could answer, Rebecca screamed from her seat. "Margaret, please!" "It was just a misunderstanding. You know I would never intentionally hurt you. I've always treated you with respect." I turned to her slowly. For the first time in 10 years, Rebecca was speaking to me with desperation instead of contempt. For the first time, she needed me instead of treating me like I was invisible. "Respect?" I asked, walking toward where she sat. "You call 10 years of humiliation respect? You call telling me to eat in the kitchen when guests came over respect? You call stealing from me for 2 years and calling me senile respect?" Her eyes filled with panic. "Steal from you? I never stole anything. This is the first time I took something of yours." Richard stepped closer and showed her the pawn shop photographs. "Mrs. Rebecca, we have photographic and video evidence of you selling your mother-in-law's belongings on at least 12 different occasions over the past 2 years. Rebecca's face went completely white. She looked at the photos, then at me, then at David, desperately searching for an explanation that could save her. Those were just small pieces I thought you didn't use anymore," she mumbled. "I never thought you'd notice. I thought you'd forgotten about them." "And that gave you the right to steal them?" I asked. "To lie in pawn shops saying they were heirlooms from your grandmother?" David looked at her in horror. "Rebecca, did you really do that? Did you really steal my mother's things for years?" Rebecca started crying harder. "David, you know we needed the extra money. Your salary wasn't enough for the lifestyle we wanted. And she has so many things. I thought she'd never notice a few small pieces missing." "But they weren't yours to take," David shouted. "They were my mother's. And you made me believe she was losing her memory when she asked about missing things. That's when I realized the full truth. Rebecca hadn't just been stealing. She'd been manipulating David into thinking I was developing dementia. Every time I mentioned I couldn't find something, she'd whisper to David that it was normal for elderly people to lose things, to forget where they put them. "Detective Lopez," I said, feeling a strange, powerful calm. "I want to press every possible charge against my daughter-in-law, not just for today's ring, but for all the thefts she's committed over the past 2 years." "No," Rebecca cried. "Please, Margaret, I can give everything back. I can pay you back. Don't do this to me." I looked her directly in the eyes. "Rebecca, for 10 years you treated me like I was invisible. You humiliated me in front of guests. You made me feel like a useless burden in my own home. For 2 years you stole from me while making me believe I was losing my mind. And now that consequences have arrived, you want mercy. But I never thought it was so serious. I never thought you had such valuable things. If you'd known I had valuable things, you would have stolen more from me." I let her process that question. "Rebecca, the problem isn't that you didn't know the value of what you stole. The problem is that you stole. The problem is that for a decade, you treated me like trash." James approached the detective. "Detective Lopez, we also want to file charges for the other documented thefts. We have evidence to prosecute at least 12 additional cases." The detective nodded. "Understood. Mrs. Rebecca, you're under arrest for grand larceny in the first degree, multiple counts of petty theft and fraud. You have the right to remain silent." As the detective read Rebecca her rights, I looked at David. He stood there watching his wife being officially arrested, finally understanding that the woman he married was a criminal who'd been exploiting his own mother for years. "Mom," he said in a broken voice, I didn't know any of this. You have to believe me." "David," I replied, "maybe you didn't know about the thefts, but you did know how Rebecca treated me. You saw every humiliation, every insult, every moment she made me feel invisible in my own home, and you never said anything." David looked down, unable to meet my eyes. He knew I was right. For 10 years, he'd been a silent witness to his wife turning me into a stranger in my own home. He'd chosen the easy path. Say nothing, don't confront, don't defend his own mother. Now that the truth was out, he finally understood the price of his silence. "Mum," he mumbled, "I thought you two would eventually work things out. I thought if I didn't get involved, things would resolve themselves." "Things don't resolve themselves, David," I replied, "especially when one person is systematically abusing another. Your wife didn't just disrespect me for a decade. She stole from me, manipulated me, and planned to steal even more. And you thought that would just resolve itself?" As I spoke, I could see several gala guests recording the scene on their phones. The story of the millionaire mother-in-law who caught her thieving daughter-in-law would be all over social media before the night was over. For Rebecca, who'd built her entire identity around being an elegant, respectable wife, this was worse than jail. Detective Lopez finished reading the Miranda rights and began escorting Rebecca toward the exit. But before they reached the door, Rebecca turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, desperate fury. "Margaret! You don't understand what you've just done," she screamed. "My life is ruined, my friends, my reputation, everything is destroyed. And why? For a stupid ring you didn't even wear." "No," I replied calmly, "for 10 years of thefts, humiliations, and mistreatment. Today's ring was simply the last straw." "But I gave you a family," she continued screaming. "I gave you grandchildren you never had. David and I gave you purpose in your old age." That was the most ridiculous thing I'd heard in years. "Rebecca, you didn't give me a family. You turned my family into strangers who treated me like a burden. And as for grandchildren, you two decided not to have kids, remember? You said children would ruin your figure and interfere with your career." David looked increasingly uncomfortable with every word coming out of his wife's mouth. I think he was finally seeing Rebecca as she really was, manipulative, selfish, and completely willing to lie when consequences caught up to her. "Margaret!" Rebecca yelled as the detective tried to move her along. "If you go through with this, you'll lose your son forever. David will never forgive you for destroying his marriage." I looked at David. He stood there, watching his wife make threats while being arrested for stealing from his own mother. "David," I said, "is that how you feel? Do you think I destroyed your marriage?" David was silent for a long moment, processing everything he'd discovered in the last 2 hours. His wife wasn't the elegant, sophisticated woman he thought he'd married. She was a thief who'd been exploiting his elderly mother for years, while manipulating him into thinking his mother's forgetfulness was dementia. "No, Mom," he finally said. "My marriage was destroyed the moment Rebecca decided to steal from you for the first time. I just didn't realize it until now." Rebecca went speechless for the first time. She'd been counting on David to blame me like he'd done so many times before. But this time the evidence was too clear, the lies too obvious. What came next? After Rebecca was taken away, Richard handed me another folder. "Mrs. Margaret, there's something else you need to know. During our investigation, we discovered Rebecca had been in contact with a lawyer specializing in wills and estates. She'd been researching legal ways to challenge your husband's will if you were to pass away." David looked sick. "What does that mean?" "It means," James explained, "your wife wasn't just stealing from your mother now, she was planning for the future. investigating how to take over the entire inheritance when your mother died. Richard added, "We found emails between Rebecca and this lawyer discussing the possibility of declaring your mother mentally incompetent. The plan was to prove Margaret had dementia and therefore lacked legal capacity to manage her finances or property." My blood ran cold. "She was planning to declare me mentally incompetent." "Yes," Richard continued. "In one email, Rebecca mentions you'd been frequently losing things, and this could be used as evidence of mental decline. Of course, now we know you weren't losing things. She was stealing them." David sat heavily in a lobby chair. "My God," he mumbled, "she was planning to steal everything from you." "Not only that," James added, "we found she'd been pressuring David to convince you to move to a nursing home. Once you were institutionalized, it would have been much easier to get a court order declaring you mentally incompetent." I remembered all those conversations where Rebecca kindly suggested I was too old to live alone, that I needed professional care, that I'd be happier in a place designed for people my age. It wasn't concern, it was strategy to steal my fortune. "Mrs. Margaret," Richard said, "your daughter-in-law is far more dangerous than we initially thought. We're not talking about someone who impulsively took jewelry. We're talking about someone who developed a long-term plan to steal your entire inheritance and have you declared mentally incompetent to legally justify it." David lifted his head, tears in his eyes. "Mum, I never suspected any of this. When Rebecca mentioned the nursing home, I thought she genuinely cared about your well-being." "David," I said, sitting next to him, "your wife manipulated you as much as she manipulated me. She knew exactly what to say to make you believe her intentions were good." James closed his folder. "Margaret, with all this evidence, the district attorney will probably offer Rebecca a plea deal. Depending on how we handle this, she could face between 5 and 15 years in prison." "And what about the money she already stole?" "Most pieces she sold went to private collectors," Richard explained. "We'll be able to track down and recover about 60% of the stolen value. The rest was probably spent on her lavish lifestyle." David sighed deeply. "Mum, what happens now? What happens to me, to our family?" It was a good question. In 2 hours, my family had completely transformed. My daughter-in-law was arrested, facing years in prison. My son finally understood he'd been married to a criminal who planned to rob me blind. And I, the senile old woman who'd been invisible for 10 years, was suddenly center stage. "David," I said, taking his hand, "what happens now is you decide what kind of man you want to be. For 10 years, you were a silent accomplice to your wife mistreating me. Now you know the truth about who she really is. The question is, what are you going to do with that information?" "Mum, I want to make things right. I want to make up for all the years I didn't defend you." "Making up for it isn't about money, David. It's about respect. It's about never again allowing anyone to treat me like I'm invisible in my own home." David nodded. Can I stay with you tonight? I don't want to be alone at home after all this." For the first time in 10 years, my son was asking something of me instead of demanding I adapt to his wife's needs. "Of course you can stay, David, but tomorrow we need to talk seriously about how we're going to rebuild our relationship." 20. 1 year later. A year after Rebecca's arrest, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined. I started appearing on local news as an advocate for elder abuse awareness. My story resonated with so many people that a producer approached me about doing a regular segment on protecting seniors from financial exploitation. The Margaret Foundation for Senior Protection was established with an initial donation of $200,000 from my inheritance. The money Rebecca had been planning to steal was now being used to protect other elderly people from criminals like her. But the most important transformation wasn't public, it was personal. This morning, as I watered the flowers in the garden Thomas and I planted 40 years ago, David arrived with someone unexpected. "Mom," he said, clearly nervous, I want you to meet someone very special. This is Sarah. We've been dating for the past 6 months. Sarah approached confidently but respectfully. She was in her early 40s, with warm brown eyes and a genuine smile. Mrs. Margaret, I've heard so much about you. David told me your whole story. You're an inspiration. The first thing I noticed about Sarah was how she looked at me with genuine respect. Not condescension. When she spoke to me, she addressed me directly, not David, as if I were invisible. Sarah, I said, what do you think about the fact that my son is dating while still technically married? David turned pale, but Sarah smiled. Mrs. Margaret, I appreciate your direct question. David told me the entire situation with Rebecca before we started dating. The divorce was finalized last month. I would never have started a relationship with a married man, no matter the circumstances. I liked her honesty. And what do you think about having a semi-famous mother-in-law who talks about family problems on TV? Sarah laughed genuinely. Honestly, I'm proud. You took a terrible experience and turned it into something that's helping thousands of people. That takes extraordinary strength. Over the following months, I watched David's relationship with Sarah grow. It was completely different from his marriage to Rebecca. Sarah encouraged David to spend time with me, to include me in their plans, to value my opinion. When they hosted dinners, they invited me as the matriarch of the family, not as a burden they had to tolerate. The most notable difference was that Sarah genuinely wanted to know me. She asked about my experiences with Thomas, about the history of our house, about family traditions. Instead of trying to erase the past, she wanted to be part of our family's continuity. One afternoon, as Sarah and I prepared dinner together, she asked me something that surprised me. Mrs. Margaret, what can I do to make sure I never become someone like Rebecca? I paused to think. Sarah, Rebecca became what she became because she saw our family as something to exploit, not contribute to. You're already different because you care enough to ask. But I want to be specific. What behaviors should I avoid? Never try to isolate David from his family. Never speak badly of me when I'm not around. Never assume that because I'm older, my opinions don't matter. And if you ever have a problem with me, talk directly to me. Don't try to manipulate David to be your messenger. Sarah nodded seriously. And is there anything I can do proactively to be a good daughter-in-law? Recognize that this house, this family, has a history that existed before you arrived. Respect that history while contributing your own chapter to it. And never forget that being part of a family means giving as much as you receive. 6 months later, David asked me to help him pick an engagement ring for Sarah. It was ironic. This all started with Rebecca stealing a $3 million ring. Now I was helping my son choose a ring to symbolize real love. Mom, he said as we looked at different options, do you think I'm making the right decision? Do you think Sarah and I can build something lasting after everything that happened with Rebecca? David, the difference between Sarah and Rebecca is that Sarah sees our family as something valuable she wants to protect. Rebecca saw our family as something to exploit. That fundamental difference means everything. The proposal was perfect. David organized a dinner at our house, in the dining room where for years Rebecca had made me feel like an intruder. But this time I sat at the head of the table in my rightful place as matriarch while David proposed to Sarah. When Sarah said yes, the first thing she did was walk over and hug me. Mrs. Margaret, she said with tears in her eyes, I hope I can be the daughter-in-law you deserve. Sarah, I replied, you already are. The wedding. The wedding was the happiest family celebration we'd had in over a decade. Sarah insisted the ceremony be held in our garden, honoring the legacy Thomas and I built. During the ceremony, David asked me to say a few words. 2 years ago, I began, I thought my family story had ended with humiliation and betrayal. But today I understand that terrible experience was simply the end of one chapter, not the end of the book. Sarah, welcome to a family that now knows how to value respect. honesty, and genuine love. After the wedding, as guests celebrated in the garden, I received a text from a woman named Karen, who'd been following my advocacy work. "Margaret, I wanted you to know your story gave me the courage to report my son, who'd been stealing my medication to sell. Thanks to your example, I regained my dignity and my health. Now my son is in rehab and our relationship is healing. Your courage inspired mine." These messages arrived regularly, people from all over who found strength to defend their rights after hearing my story, proof that the pain I suffered had transformed into something positive and powerful. That night, after all the guests left, I sat alone in my garden, reflecting on the journey I'd lived. 2 years ago, I was an invisible elderly woman victimized by a daughter-in-law who saw me as a nuisance. Now I was an advocate with a foundation helping families, a woman with a new daughter-in-law who genuinely respected me, and the matriarch of a family rebuilt on foundations of honesty and love. My phone rang one last time. James. "Margaret, I have final news about Rebecca. Her appeal was just rejected. She's serving the full 12 years. "And how do I feel about that?" I asked myself aloud. "Only you can answer that." The truth was, I no longer felt anger toward Rebecca. I felt pity for her. She'd had the opportunity to be part of a real family and squandered it for greed and envy. Now she'd spend 12 years in prison while I enjoyed the new life I'd built through courage and determination. "James," I said, "Rebecca is no longer part of my story. My story now is about the thousands of families we've helped, about the new relationship I have with David, about the wonderful daughter-in-law I have, and about the legacy I'm building." After hanging up, I looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thomas, I hope you're proud." The invisible old woman who almost lost everything finally found her voice, her power, and her purpose. If you made it this far, thank you for staying with my story. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Elder abuse is real. According to the National Council on Aging, approximately 1 in 10 Americans aged 60 and older have experienced some form of elder abuse. Financial exploitation is one of the most common types. Trust your instincts. If you feel something is wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that you're just getting old or being forgetful when things go missing. Document everything. Keep records of your valuables. Take photos. Get appraisals. Make it harder for someone to steal from you without consequences. You're never too old to stand up for yourself. Age doesn't make you powerless. It gives you wisdom, experience, and if you choose to use it, strength. Family doesn't mean you accept abuse. Real love includes respect. If someone in your family treats you poorly, you have every right to set boundaries and demand better treatment. The sweetest revenge wasn't destroying Rebecca. The sweetest revenge was rebuilding myself. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from? I love connecting with people all over the world. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have called the police immediately or handled it differently? Have you ever dealt with a difficult family member? You don't have to share details, but I'd love to hear how you handled it. What part of the story surprised you most? And if this story resonated with you, here's what would help me enormously. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future stories. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Turn on notifications so you're first to know when I post. I read every single comment, and your stories inspire me to keep sharing mine. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you're never too old, too invisible, or too powerless to stand up for yourself. The world needs to hear your voice. Much love, Margaret. If you enjoyed this story and want to support me creating more content like this, you can send a super thanks. Every bit helps me continue this work and reach more people who need to hear these stories. If you or someone you know is experiencing elder abuse, here are some resources. National Elder Abuse Hotline, 1-800-677-1116. Adult Protective Services. Contact your local agency, National Centre on Elder Abuse, ncea.acl.gov. You're not alone. Help is available.